A sterile billionaire is moved to tears upon discovering that the poor black woman who saved his life also gave him twins. The executive suite on the 87th floor of Carter Enterprises exuded authority. Beyond the expansive glass windows, New York City sprawled like a shimmering quilt beneath the overcast October sky. At 42, Andrew Carter stood tall, gazing out over the city he had long regarded as his personal empire. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the polished mahogany desk as he braced himself for a call that would alter everything. The phone rang at precisely 6:45 p.m. Dr. Richardson, one of the most esteemed fertility experts in the nation, was nothing if not punctual. Andrew pressed the speakerphone button, his voice calm and measured, despite the storm of worry that had consumed him for weeks. "Mr. Carter, I have your results." Adjusting the knot of his Italian silk tie, a reflex honed by years of keeping a cool facade, Andrew replied evenly, "Go ahead, doctor." There was a pause, then the words hit like a sledgehammer. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, but the results are definitive. Your condition is reversible. You're sterile." The quiet that followed felt oppressive, as if the room itself had been vacuum sealed. Andrew's usually steady hands, adept at navigating billion-dollar deals, now quivered ever so slightly. "There has to be a mistake," he said, his voice raspier than usual. "Run the tests again." Dr. Richardson's tone was measured yet firm. "We've conducted every available test, Mr. Carter, multiple times. The results don't change." Andrew cut him off sharply, his voice steely. "How much? What will it take to fix this? Name your price, doctor. There must be some experimental solution, some breakthrough on the horizon." The doctor's response carried a weight of finality. "Mr. Carter, some things simply can't be solved with money. There are other options we could explore. Adoption, for example." But the line went dead as Andrew ended the call with a single abrupt motion. Adoption. The word tasted bitter, almost insulting. The Carter legacy couldn't be allowed to end this way. His father had clawed his way out of nothing to build an empire, and Andrew had transformed it into a global powerhouse. For what? To see it all end with him? He shot to his feet, his tall figure outlined in the reflective glass. The man staring back at him seemed almost unrecognizable. Silver streaks lined his temples. His piercing green eyes were shadowed by exhaustion, and his jaw was locked tight, betraying the immense pressure bearing down on him. Grabbing his coat and the keys to his Aston Martin, he stormed toward the private elevator. He needed air. He needed motion. The elevator delivered him directly to the underground garage, where his sleek car waited, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Outside, a light drizzle had begun, the city's streets glistening under the rain as he sped through Manhattan. His thoughts raced as fast as the car's engine. Years of strategy, sacrifice, and calculated moves, all unraveling in an instant. Control. It was slipping away. Andrew's signature skill felt as natural as water slipping through his fingers. At an intersection, the traffic light turned red, but he hardly noticed. His thoughts were elsewhere, looping endlessly on the doctor's recent words. The blaring sound of car horns snapped him back to the moment, but it was too late. The crash was devastating. Metal crumpled, glass exploded, and time seemed to crawl. His Aston Martin spun violently before slamming into a streetlight, mangled beyond recognition. As his consciousness began to fade, he caught a glimpse of a face. A black woman with gentle but determined eyes approached the wreck. She was shouting, but her words were muffled in his dazed state. Rain poured down, washing away the blood trickling from his forehead. "Hang in there!" Her voice cut through the haze. "I'm getting you out!" The acrid scent of gasoline and scorched rubber filled the air. Andrew tried to speak, but no sound escaped his lips. Ignoring the danger, the woman worked furiously to pry the wrecked door open. Her hands bled from the effort, but she didn't stop. "My name is Grace," she said, her voice unwavering despite the chaos. "You're going to be okay. I promise." For the first time in years, Andrew heard a promise he instinctively believed. Darkness finally claimed him. The antiseptic smell was the first thing Andrew noticed when he came to. He blinked against the harsh hospital lights, his vision slowly clearing. A steady beeping from a heart monitor filled the quiet room, pacing his recovery like a metronome. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter," a nurse's soft voice greeted him. "You had us worried." Andrew tried moving, but his body protested every attempt. Bandages wrapped around his chest, and his right leg was immobilized in a heavy cast. Fragments of the crash floated to the surface. Rain, the collision, and a face. "The woman," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "Where's the woman who saved me?" The nurse adjusted his IV, her expression calm. "Grace Harper. She pulled you from the wreckage just before the car caught fire. She saved your life, Mr. Carter. It was nothing short of a miracle." The name resonated in his mind, Grace Harper, like a lifeline. Amid the fog of fragmented memories, her resolute gaze stood out, clear and bright. "I need to see her," he murmured, attempting to sit up. Pain forced him back down. "You need to rest," the nurse insisted firmly. "Ms. Harper has already been discharged. Just a few cuts on her hands. Nothing major." The next several hours blurred together with doctors running tests and executives flooding his phone. His assistant, Olivia Zhang, eventually arrived, a stack of documents in hand. "The board is in chaos," she announced, her heels clicking sharply as she organized the papers on a nearby table. When news of the accident broke, the company's stock dropped 3%, but Andrew barely noticed. His mind was fixated on Grace and the way she had risked her life for someone she didn't even know. In his world of contracts and deals, genuine acts of kindness were almost unheard of. "Olivia," he cut off her ongoing report about the council's concerns, "I need you to track someone down. Grace Harper." "The woman from the accident?" Olivia asked, looking puzzled. "We've already taken care of that, sir. We sent her a generous check as a thank you." "A check?" His tone carried a sharp edge, surprising even himself. "She saved my life, Olivia. That's not something money can repay." His own words landed heavily, stirring something deep within him. A man who had always believed everything had a price suddenly found himself questioning the very foundation of that belief. Over the following weeks, while Andrew's body recovered, his spirit remained unsettled. Sleep brought nightmares where he relived the crash, always waking just as Grace entered the scene. By day, between video calls and grueling physical therapy, his mind kept drifting back to the news that had upended everything, his sterility. "You seem different," Dr. Matthews, his physical therapist, remarked during an especially tough session. "Almost dying has that effect," Andrew replied, attempting a shaky step without the support bars. His legs wobbled under the strain. "It's more than that," Dr. Matthews pressed, steadying him as he stumbled. And there was. The experience of being utterly powerless, entrusting his life to a complete stranger, had shaken him to his core. The control he had clung to so tightly now felt like a fragile illusion. One afternoon, as Andrew sifted through reports in his hospital room, Olivia entered, her expression unusually serious. "I found Grace Harper," she announced, scrolling through her tablet. "She's a teacher at a public school in the Bronx. No kids, lives alone, does a lot of volunteering at shelters." Andrew snapped his laptop shut. "Set up a meeting as soon as I'm out of here." Olivia hesitated. "There's something else." She sent the check back, didn't even open the envelope. A small, involuntary smile crept onto his face. Of course she had. Grace wasn't the kind of person who could be bought. The night before, he was discharged. Andrew stood on the hospital balcony, leaning heavily on a cane. A nurse approached, handing him a small wooden cross. "We found this among your things," she explained. "Miss Harper left it for you the day of the accident. She said it was for protection." Andrew turned the modest object in his hands, feeling its coarse surface. It wasn't extravagant, yet it carried a profound significance. In his world of excess and grandeur, that small, heartfelt gesture stood out like a true gem in a sea of imitation. Later that night, sitting alone in his bedroom, Andrew Carter, the man whose life was built on power and control, found himself admitting something new. There are miracles money can't buy. And maybe, just maybe, that was the most valuable truth life had to offer him. The Bronx radiated an energy entirely distinct from Manhattan's. From the window of his bulletproof Mercedes, Andrew observed the lively streets, a far cry from his high-powered corporate surroundings. Kids played along the sidewalks, street vendors called out to customers, and a palpable sense of community filled the air. Public School 218, a weathered red brick building, loomed ahead. Adjusting his cane, still a necessity after 2 months of recovery, Andrew dismissed his driver. "Wait here, Harrison." The school hallways were alive with the echoes of children's laughter. A secretary led him to the teacher's lounge, where Grace Harper was busy organizing student assignments. She looked up, visibly surprised to see him. "Mr. Carter," she greeted him, her voice calm yet firm, just as he remembered. "I wasn't expecting you." Grace's simple pencil skirt and navy blouse complemented her neat curly hair, tied back in an elegant bun. There was an understated grace about her that commanded attention. "I needed to thank you in person," Andrew replied, his nerves betraying him slightly. "And to apologize for the check. It was inappropriate." Grace's lips curled into a subtle smile. "I don't need rewards for doing what's right, Mr. Carter." "Andrew, please." Their conversation was cut short as a wave of dizziness hit him unexpectedly. Grace quickly pulled up a chair. "You're still recovering," she observed with concern. "I'm fine," he assured her, though his pale face told another story. Gathering himself, Andrew decided to take a bold step. "Actually, I'd like to invite you to dinner as a proper thank you." Grace hesitated, her sharp eyes studying him. "That's not necessary." "Please," Andrew pressed. "No pretenses, no strings. Just a meal between two people." After a pause, Grace nodded. "All right, but I choose the place." The restaurant Grace picked was a cozy, family-owned spot in the Bronx, a far cry from the luxury establishments Andrew was used to. Yet, the warmth and sincerity of the place were undeniable. Over the course of the meal, their conversation unfolded effortlessly. Grace shared her experiences as a teacher, her dreams of inspiring change in the community, and the challenges she faced. Andrew found himself captivated by her passion and resilience. Finally, he asked the question that had haunted him for months. "Why did you put yourself at risk like that?" The car might have exploded. Grace paused, her fork hovering mid-air, simply because it felt like the right thing to do. "Sometimes, we don't need a big reason to act, Andrew," she said. Her straightforwardness struck a chord with him. In his world of schemes and ulterior motives, her honesty was a breath of fresh air. But then Grace shifted uncomfortably, placing a hand on her stomach. "Sorry," she muttered, quickly standing. "I need the restroom." As she walked away, Andrew felt a twinge of concern. When she returned, her face was noticeably pale. "Are you okay?" he asked. Grace hesitated, biting her lip. "Not really. There's something I need to tell you." Taking a deep breath, she finally said, "I'm pregnant." Twins. For a moment, the world stood still. Andrew felt the air leave his lungs like he'd been hit. "I found out a few weeks ago," Grace admitted, her voice shaky. "I'm still wrapping my head around it." "The father," Andrew started, but Grace cut him off. "He's not involved, and I'm fine with that." A heavy silence hung between them. Andrew grappled with the news, memories of his own inability to have children swirling alongside a wave of emotions he couldn't name. Grace misread his silence. "I'm not telling you this because I need anything," she clarified. "I just thought you should know, especially since we've gotten closer." "Let me help," Andrew blurted, before he could stop himself. Grace's brow furrowed. "I don't need charity," she said firmly. "It's not charity," he countered, leaning forward. "It's gratitude. You saved my life, Grace. Let me return the favor." The rest of their dinner was filled with a quiet tension, the air thick with words left unsaid. When they parted at the restaurant's entrance, Andrew couldn't shake the feeling that everything had shifted. Back in his Manhattan penthouse, he stayed up late, staring out at the city lights. Grace's revelation echoed in his mind, intertwining with his own questions about fatherhood and legacy. He picked up the small wooden cross she had once given him at the hospital, turning it over in his hands. The universe, he thought, had a strange sense of humor. After accepting he would never have children, fate had introduced him to a woman carrying twins, a woman who was beginning to matter more to him than anyone had in years. In his office, the moonlight spilled over financial reports and contracts that had once consumed him. But now, for the first time, Andrew Carter wondered if he'd been chasing all the wrong things. News of the budding connection between Andrew Carter and a Bronx teacher quickly made waves in Manhattan's elite circles. At Carter Enterprises, Andrew endured yet another day of subtle stares and barely veiled murmurs. "The Blackwoods have withdrawn their invite to the benefit dinner," Olivia mentioned as she dropped a stack of mail on his desk. Apparently, they're reassessing their social ties. Without missing a beat, Andrew signed another document. "Send Lady Blackwood white roses," he instructed calmly. "She's always been resistant to change." Over the past weeks, Andrew had settled into an unspoken routine. Occasional lunches with Grace, visits to her school, and long meandering conversations that unveiled new facets of her personality. His respect and admiration for her grew with each interaction. During one such lunch in a cozy Harlem cafe, far from prying eyes, Grace brought up the inevitable. "Andrew, people are talking," she said. That afternoon, she looked particularly radiant in an emerald dress that gently accentuated her 4-month pregnancy. "Let them talk," he said lightly, pouring her more water. "I've never let gossip guide my choices." "But I do," Grace countered, her voice tinged with worry. "Your friends, your family, they think I'm just a gold digger, the pregnant black teacher who caught the eye of a billionaire." Andrew's temper flared. "They don't know you." "Exactly," she replied with a soft sigh. "And they don't understand my world any more than you did a few weeks ago." Her words struck a nerve. She wasn't wrong. Before the accident, the Bronx had existed in his mind only as a line on financial reports. That evening, during dinner at his sister Emily's opulent Upper East Side home, Grace's words echoed with harsh clarity. "Are you really this naive, Andrew?" Emily's voice dripped with feigned concern. This woman clearly saw her chance and took it. "Don't speak about things you don't understand," Andrew said, his tone dangerously steady. "She's pregnant by another man, for heaven's sake," Emily snapped. "And you, the paragon of prudence, are throwing everything away for her. For her." "For an exceptional woman," Andrew replied, standing. "A woman who saved my life without expecting anything in return. A woman with more integrity in her little finger than everyone in this room combined." The silence that followed was deafening. Without another word, Andrew walked out, ignoring Emily's protests. Hours later, in his apartment, his phone buzzed with a message from Grace. "We need to talk." The next day they met in a park near her school. The autumn trees glowed in warm shades of red and gold, a stark contrast to the tension between them. "I had a visitor yesterday," Grace began, her voice composed but firm. "Your sister, Emily." Andrew felt his stomach drop. "What did she say?" "She offered me money," Grace said with a wry laugh. "A generous payout to make me disappear from your life. She claimed she was safeguarding the Carter family's interests." "I'll handle it," Andrew said quickly, but Grace stopped him. "It's not that simple, Andrew. This isn't just about your sister. It's an entire system that sees us as a bad fit. You might be able to brush it off, but I face it every single day." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. "My students asked me today if I'd quit teaching once I married the rich guy. Like that's the only path for someone like me." Andrew reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Grace, please," he began, but she shook her head. "I need time," she said gently. "Time to figure out what I'm feeling, what I want. These babies," she rested a hand on her stomach, "deserve a mother who is strong and confident in her choices." The crisp autumn wind swirled fallen leaves around them, a golden whirlwind reflecting the season's bittersweet beauty. Andrew felt an ache deep in his chest, sharper than anything he'd ever known. "How long?" he asked, his voice strained. "I don't know," Grace admitted, "but I have to do this. For me, and for them." As she walked down the park path, Andrew watched her go, realizing some challenges couldn't be solved with wealth or power. The toughest walls were the unseen ones, built by generations of bias and social norms. Back in his office, Andrew found an envelope from the fertility clinic waiting on his desk. Inside was confirmation of his irreversible condition. Once, such news would have shattered him. Now it felt like just another reminder of life's unpredictability. He picked up his phone, hesitated, then sent a message to Grace. "I'll give you the time you need. But understand this. What we have is priceless to me, and I'm not letting go without a fight." Winter descended on New York with unrelenting force. From his office window, Andrew watched snow blanket the city. It had been a month since Grace asked for space. 30 days that felt endless. "Mr. Carter," Olivia said, breaking his thoughts, "the private investigator sent the report you requested." Andrew hesitated before taking the envelope. He had promised to respect Grace's space, but his concern for her and the twins pushed him to take discreet steps. The report revealed parts of Grace's life she had never shared. She was the only child of a nurse who had passed away 5 years ago and had been raised in the Bronx by her grandmother, a housekeeper for 4 decades. Despite the odds, Grace graduated from NYU with honors in education on a full scholarship and volunteered in adult literacy programs. One detail caught his attention. Grace had been engaged to Marcus Bennett, a rising star lawyer who had died in a car accident 2 years ago, the same kind of accident where she'd saved Andrew's life. Olivia hesitated. "There's something else," she said. "It's about the father of the twins." "No," Andrew cut her off firmly. "That's something Grace should choose to share when she's ready." The weeks that followed were a test of his patience. He threw himself into work, yet every trip through the Bronx or a glance at a pregnant woman made his heart race. One chilly afternoon his phone buzzed with an unexpected call. "Andrew," Grace's voice was unsteady. "I need help." 15 minutes later, he was rushing into the ER at Presbyterian Hospital. Grace sat on a gurney, looking pale but alert. "I passed out during class," she said, clearly embarrassed. "The doctor says it's anemia, nothing major." Andrew noticed her trembling hands. "But you're still scared," he observed gently. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Marcus died in a hospital like this," she admitted quietly. "I was pregnant then, but I lost the baby soon after." Her words hit Andrew like a jolt. Suddenly, everything clicked. Her hesitancy to get close, her fear of losing the twins, the way she had stepped in to save him during the accident. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" he asked softly, pulling up a chair beside her. "Because it hurts," she replied simply, "and I didn't want you to think I was trying to replace something or someone." Andrew reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "Grace, look at me. You're not replacing anyone. What we have, whatever it is ours, and it's special." Just then, the doctor walked in with test results. The twins were doing well, but Grace needed rest and iron supplements. "I'll take care of you," Andrew promised once they were alone. He quickly added, "Not as some hero or savior, but as someone who genuinely cares. Let me help, even if it's just by hiring a substitute for your classes until you're better." Grace hesitated, considering his offer. "My students. They'll be fine," he assured her, "and you'll come back stronger for them." That night, after ensuring Grace was comfortable at home, Andrew made his way to the cemetery where Marcus was buried. Standing in front of the modest headstone, he felt an odd sense of connection to a man he'd never known. "She still loves you," he said quietly, "and she always will. I'm not here to replace you, just to find my own place in her heart, if I can earn it." Over the next few days, Andrew settled into a new rhythm. Every morning, he arranged for fresh breakfasts and vitamins to be delivered to Grace's door. He sent brief, thoughtful messages each afternoon, never pushing her for more than she wanted to share. A week later, his phone buzzed with a photo. It was the twins' first 3D ultrasound. His heart skipped a beat as he studied their tiny, forming faces. "Our girls," Grace's text read. "Thought you'd want to see." Andrew printed the image and tucked it safely into his personal drawer. With the wooden cross she'd given him still in his possession, the thought of two little girls stirred something in Andrew. He couldn't quite identify. That evening, in the solitude of his apartment, he found himself contemplating the strange ways life could mend old wounds. The pain of not being able to have biological children, once a heavy burden, now seemed insignificant compared to the joy of loving two children who weren't his by blood, yet already had a hold on his heart. Maybe a real legacy, he mused aloud, isn't about passing down genes, but about sharing love. By the end of January, New York experienced an epic snowfall that made headlines. Andrew was gazing out of his office window, mesmerized by the swirling snowflakes, when Olivia burst in. "The schools in the Bronx are closed because of the storm, including Miss Harper's," she announced hurriedly. He didn't even wait for her to finish before grabbing his coat. The roads were a mess, but Harrison, her driver, skillfully navigated the snow-covered streets in the Mercedes to reach Grace's building. Inside, he found her curled up on the couch under a blanket, reviewing her students' assignments. Her baby bump, now 6 months along, was unmistakable. There was a calmness about her that captivated him. "You didn't have to come," she said, though her smile revealed how much she appreciated it. "Is the heat working okay?" he asked, noticing the portable heater nearby. "It is," she said hesitantly, "but the girls seem extra restless in this cold." As if on cue, her belly moved noticeably. Andrew's curiosity got the better of him. "May I?" he asked, extending his hand. Grace guided it gently to her stomach. The first kick he felt was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, a moment that connected him to something greater. "This is Lily," Grace said with a smile, moving his hand slightly. "And this is Rose. They already have their own personalities." "Flowers," Andrew murmured. "Perfect names." Grace's expression softened. Those were the last words my mum spoke to me, she explained. I was visiting her in the hospital with lilies and roses. She said they'd be beautiful names for granddaughters. Andrew sat down beside her, still in awe of the life stirring beneath his hand. Tell me more about your mother, he said. Over the next few hours, as snow blanketed the city, Grace opened up. She told him about her childhood, her mother working long shifts at the hospital to provide for her education, and her grandmother's bedtime stories about life in the South while braiding her hair. Tears welled up in Grace's eyes as she confessed, I always thought I'd be alone during this time. Pregnant. Without my mom. Without my grandmother. You're not alone, Andrew said firmly. A warm silence fell over the room, broken only by the gentle hum of the heater and the occasional stirrings of the babies. Finally, Grace broke the quiet, her voice tentative. Andrew, there's something I need to tell you about the girl's father. He felt his muscles tighten, but stayed composed. Only if you want to, he said. She hesitated before continuing, her voice shaking slightly. It was just one night. A few months after Marcus's passing, I felt adrift. One night, I bumped into an old friend of his at a bar. We shared drinks and reminisced about Marcus, about loss. Andrew reached out, gently holding her hand, urging her to go on. By the next morning, he was gone. He'd left a note, saying he was heading to Seattle, unable to cope with the memories of Marcus in New York. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. I'm not even sure if he knows about the twins. Do you want him to? Andrew asked gently. Grace shook her head firmly. No. That night wasn't about love. It was about mourning. The girls deserve better. Right then, as if sensing their mother's emotions, the twins stirred more vigorously. Without thinking, Andrew traced soft circles over Grace's belly, calming them instantly. They adore you, he said. Grace smiled through her tears. And I love them already, she replied, the words flowing naturally and catching them both by surprise. The rest of the afternoon felt like a quiet sanctuary. Andrew made hot chocolate in Grace's tiny kitchen while she shared the middle names she was considering for the girls. By evening, as the snow started easing up, Andrew realized something profound had shifted. It wasn't just about him and Grace anymore. It was about Lily and Rose, about a family, about belonging. Stay, Grace said softly as he prepared to leave. The snow's still bad, and I feel safe with you here. That night, cramped on her too small sofa, Andrew dreamed vividly. He was in a garden filled with lilies and roses, and two little girls ran toward him, calling him Dad. He woke with tears in his eyes, recognizing that while his heart had already made its choice, his mind was still catching up. The news broke like a bombshell one March morning. Billionaire Andrew Carter sparks romance with Grace Bronk's teacher. The headline accompanied a photo of Andrew and Grace leaving a prenatal appointment. Their hands were intertwined, his expression protective, as he guided her past a crowd of photographers. We've tracked the leak, Olivia announced, dropping a pile of tabloids onto the desk. It came from someone at the hospital. Andrew barely registered her words. His attention was locked on his phone, where Grace's urgent texts appeared. Reporters at the school. I can't teach. The kids are scared. Harrison, he barked through the intercom to his driver. Get the car. Now. Andrew's arrival at Public School 218 only fueled the frenzy. Photographers and reporters swarmed the gates, shouting intrusive questions. Mr. Carter, are those babies yours? Are the rumors true that you're funding the pregnancy? Just how much is this drama setting you back? Grace was in her classroom when he found her, shaking as the principal tried to console her. Get me out of here, she whispered the moment she saw him. As Andrew's security team escorted them to the car, Grace kept her face down, one hand protectively resting on her rounded belly. The twins, seemingly aware of her distress, shifted uneasily. "Take us to my apartment," Andrew directed Harrison. "It's the safest place right now." Once inside the shelter of his penthouse, Grace finally broke down. "They're turning my life into a circus," she cried, tears of anger streaming down her cheeks. "Making up lies, gossiping about the girls. My students had to witness that humiliation." Andrew moved to comfort her, but she stepped away. "Don't you get it? This is exactly what I was afraid of." Her voice shook with emotion. "Now, I'm the gold digger, the pregnant opportunist. Years of hard work, building my career as an educator, destroyed in a single day." "We could sue the tabloids," Andrew suggested, but Grace cut him off with a harsh laugh. "Sue them? Andrew, you still don't get it. It's not about money or winning some lawsuit. It's about dignity, about being able to walk outside without feeling hunted, about my students not having to hear vile rumors about their teacher." She turned to the window, staring out at the city lights. "You know what hurts the most? The racist comments. The black woman who snagged the rich white guy. Like I'm some kind of..." Her voice cracked, and this time, when Andrew embraced her, she didn't resist. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry I didn't see this coming, that I didn't protect you." She sighed. "It's not your fault. It's the world we live in." That night, after Grace finally fell asleep in one of the guest rooms, Andrew made a flurry of calls to his legal team, demanding they go after the worst tabloids, to his media contacts, setting firm boundaries, to Grace's school, arranging for extra security. But the last call rattled him the most. "So this is how you're tearing apart the family?" Emily's voice was sharp the moment she answered. "Mum is heartbroken." "Our mother's been gone for 15 years, Emily," Andrew replied coldly. "And, as for the family, maybe it's time to start a new one, with her." "Be realistic, Andrew," she shot back. "The board is furious. Stocks are tanking. Investors are doubting your leadership." "You know what?" he interrupted. "For the first time in my life, I couldn't care less." The silence on the other end was deafening. "Do you really love her?" Emily finally asked. But it wasn't a question. "More than I thought I could," he admitted. "And those girls, Emily, when I feel them moving, when I hear their hearts beating on the ultrasounds, they're not yours," his sister said softly. "They're mine, in the only sense that matters," he replied. In the heart, after hanging up, Andrew returned to the room where Grace was sleeping. In the dark, he could make out the outline of her belly under the sheets. He sat down in the armchair next to the bed, determined to protect her sleep. Hours later, Grace woke up, startled. "Andrew," she called out in the dark, "I'm here." "The girls?" She took his hand, placing it on her stomach. "They're dancing." In the silence of the early morning, feeling the twins' movements under his palm, Andrew made a decision. No matter what the cost to his reputation or fortune, he would protect this family that fate had given him. Not out of obligation or guilt, but out of love. The kind of love that transcends blood and surnames. "We'll face this together," he promised. One day at a time, Grace entwined her fingers with his, and there, in the dark, with Lily and Rose dancing under their joined hands, they found a moment of peace in the midst of the storm. The meeting room on the 87th floor of Carter Enterprises was packed. Board members, majority shareholders and lawyers occupied every available seat. At the center of all the attention, Andrew remained impassive, while presentations detailing the fall in the company's shares flashed on the screen. "The losses are significant." Harold Whitman, chairman of the board, pointed to the red graphs. Our Asian investors are especially concerned about the Mr. Carter's personal distraction. Distraction? Andrew arched an eyebrow. Is that what we're calling my personal life now? Andrew, Emily interjected, her voice tense. Be reasonable. The company's image. The company's image is tied to my professional competence, he cut in, which remains unshaken. Harold sniffed. Uncomfortable. There's a simple solution. Mrs. Harper has already turned down several generous offers to step aside discreetly. We can increase the amount. The silence that followed was icy. Andrew stood up slowly, his green eyes fixed on Harold. Let me clarify something. His voice was dangerously calm. Grace and the twins are not in negotiations. If anyone in this room dares approach her again with offers, it will be the last thing they do in this company. You can't threaten the board, Emily protested. It's not a threat. Andrew smiled coldly. It's a promise. And since we're discussing the company's image, he gestured, and Olivia entered with a new presentation. This is the project I've been developing over the last few months. A scholarship program for public school teachers, focused on underprivileged areas. Grace helped me structure it. The numbers began to appear on the screen. Investments in education, positive media returns, social impact projections. We'll turn a scandal into a revolutionary social responsibility initiative, he continued. Asians love that sort of thing, don't they, Harold? The meeting ended in a tense stalemate. As the executives left, Emily grabbed her brother's arm. What's happened to you? She asked, her voice a mixture of concern and incredulity. I grew up, he replied simply. That afternoon, Andrew drove to the Bronx. Grace had returned to work, now protected by discreet security guards. He found her in her empty classroom, organizing student work. How was the meeting? She asked, noticing his expression. I survived, he smiled, kissing her softly. Are the girls behaving today? Rose is restless. Grace stroked her belly. Lily's asleep, as usual after lunch. Andrew knelt down, pressing his ear against her belly. Hey, little Rose, giving Mommy a hard time. The moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Melissa, one of Grace's students. Miss Harper. The girl hesitated when she saw Andrew. I'm sorry. I come in, Melissa. Grace smiled warmly. Mr. Carter doesn't bite. The girl entered shyly, holding a piece of paper. It's just that I wrote an essay about family, and I wanted you to read it first. Grace took the paper, her eyes scanning the words. Tears began to form. Melissa, this is... She couldn't finish. Andrew took the essay gently. It was a story about different kinds of families, about how love didn't have to follow rules or traditions. The girl had used Grace and him as an example. Some idiots at school said bad things, Melissa explained, blushing, about you and Mr. Carter, but I told them they didn't understand anything about real love. Grace hugged her student and crying openly now. Andrew felt his own heart squeeze. Later, at home, Grace reread the essay several times. You know what's amazing, she said, snuggling into Andrew's arms. A 12-year-old schoolgirl understands more about love and acceptance than all that advice full of adults. Speaking of which, Andrew hesitated. I have something to show you. He presented the plans for the scholarship program, explaining how she had inspired him to create something meaningful. You're using our relationship to do something good, she realized, amazed. I learned from the best, he smiled. Besides, our daughters deserve to see that they can make a difference in the world. Grace froze. Did you say, our daughters? Yes, he held up his hands. If you allow it, I want to be their father. Not just on paper, but in every way that matters. The tears returned to Grace's eyes, but this time of happiness. The girls have already chosen. She laughed between sobs. They always calm down when they hear your voice. That night, lying in bed, planning for the future, Andrew reflected on how his life had changed. The worries about legacy and succession that had plagued him so much now seemed so superficial. His true legacy was there, in the love he felt for Grace, and in the two little lives he already considered his daughters. The 8th month of pregnancy arrived with an unprecedented heat wave in New York. Grace, now away from school due to maternity leave, was restless in the apartment Andrew had insisted she temporarily occupy closer to the hospital. "The girls are restless today," she commented over breakfast, watching Andrew adjust his tie. More than usual, he kissed her forehead before leaving. "Get some rest." "Olivia cancelled all my afternoon appointments. I'll be back early." But fate had other plans. At 2:37 p.m. during a crucial meeting with Japanese investors, Andrew received a message that made his blood run cold. Contractions have started. Hospital now. 2 months ahead of schedule, the chaos that followed was a blur. Andrew barely registered the shocked faces of the executives as he rushed out of the room. In the elevator, his hands were shaking so badly that he could barely dial Harrison's number. "I've got her, sir," his driver informed him. "Dr. Phillips will meet us at the Presbyterian." Traffic was impossible due to the extreme heat. Accidents were blocking the main roads, and a demonstration was further complicating matters. "How long?" Andrew asked Olivia over the phone while his private helicopter was being prepared. 30 minutes to the nearest helipad to the hospital," she replied. "Grace is fine, but the contractions are increasing." At the hospital, Grace was fighting panic. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. Premature birth, risk, need constant monitoring. "Andrew," she whispered between contractions, "I need him here." The nurse held her hand. "He's on his way, darling. Take a deep breath." The minutes dragged on like hours. The twins' heart monitors showed worrying changes. "Blood pressure rising," a nurse warned. Dr. Phillips looked at the data with a grave expression. "We need to do an emergency C-section. We can't wait." "No," Grace protested. "Andrew needs to be here." He promised another contraction hit her, stronger than the previous ones. The monitors began beeping frantically. "Lily is in pain," the doctor announced. "We have no choice." In the helicopter, Andrew was receiving real-time updates. Each new report increased his anguish. "Faster," he ordered the pilot, ignoring flight regulations. When he finally arrived at the hospital, he was greeted by Olivia, her face pale. "They're already in the operating room," she informed him. Rushing to his side, Grace had a complication. Andrew felt his world spin. Memories of his own mother, who died giving birth to a brother who also didn't survive, flooded his mind. "No," he muttered, "I can't lose them." None of them. The medical team allowed him into the operating room after a quick preparation. Grace was conscious, but visibly frightened. "I'm sorry," she cried when he held her hand. "I tried to wait." He kissed her forehead through the surgical mask. "You're the strongest person I know. The three of you are going to be fine." The next few minutes were tense. The silence in the room was broken only by the sound of the equipment and Dr. Phillips's precise instructions. "First baby," the doctor announced. Lily arrived in absolute silence. "Why isn't she crying?" Grace asked in a panic. The neonatal team worked frantically. Eternal seconds passed before a week, but determined cry filled the room. Rose followed. Her protests immediate and forceful. Typical. Grace laughed through her tears. Lily was always the quiet one, but the joy was short-lived. Grace began to show signs of bleeding. "Pressure dropping," someone shouted. "Mr. Carter, you need to leave now." A nurse pushed him towards the door. "No, Grace." "Andrew," she called weakly, "take care of our girls." The next 2 hours were the longest of his life. Andrew alternated between the neonatal ICU, where his daughters were struggling in incubators, and the operating room corridor, where Grace was fighting for her life. Lily, the smallest of the twins, needed respiratory support. Rose, although stronger, had cardiac arrhythmia. I spoke to specialists in Boston and London. Olivia said, coordinating an international network of doctors. The best teams are on standby. Finally, Dr. Phillips emerged from the operating room, exhausted, but smiling. She's a fighter, she announced. The bleeding is under control. Andrew collapsed into a chair, tears flowing freely. Hours later, when Grace finally woke up in the ICU, she found Andrew holding her hand, his face marked by tiredness and worry. The girls was his first question. They're warriors like their mother. He smiled, showing her photos on his cell phone. Small, but determined. We need to be strong for them, Grace whispered. You three are my strength, Andrew replied, his voice breaking, and I promise I'll never be late for anything important in your lives again. The days in the neonatal ICU became a routine of hope and apprehension. Andrew divided the 10th floor of the Presbyterian into 2 wards, one for Grace, who was still recovering, and one for the twins. Go team of specialists worked in shifts, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat of the little warriors. Lily has responded well to the new treatment. Dr. Martinez, the chief neonatologist, explained during the morning visit. Her oxygen levels are gradually improving. Andrew watched his infant daughter through the glass of the incubator. At just $1.8 kilo, Lily seemed impossibly fragile, but there was a quiet determination in her fight for life that moved him deeply. And Rose, Grace asked from the wheelchair that Andrew insisted she used during visits. She still has arrhythmia, but she's more stable. The doctor smiled. She has a strong personality. Yesterday she had her heart sensor removed 3 times, just like her mother. Andrew teased, earning a feigned indignant look from Grace. Recovery was a slow process, marked by small daily victories. Every gram gained was celebrated. Every improvement in the tests was celebrated as a battle won. One afternoon, while Grace was resting, Andrew had an idea. He consulted the medical team and, with their approval, began a special ritual. "What are you doing?" Grace asked when she found him in the neonatal ICU late at night, reading quietly to the twins. "The Little Prince." He showed the book. "My mother used to read it to me when I was sick." I thought his voice faltered slightly. Grace moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "Go on." "They recognize your voice." It was true. During her nightly readings, the monitor showed the babies calming down, their heartbeat stabilizing at the sound of her voice. Days turned into weeks. Rose was the first to be able to breathe unaided, her strength surprising even the most experienced doctors. Lily, although progressing more slowly, showed a quiet resilience that reminded Andrew of Grace. "She has your eyes," Grace commented one day, watching Lily through the glass. That same determined look. "It's her eyes," Andrew corrected softly, "and her strength." News of the twins' condition had leaked to the press, but this time, the reaction was different. Letters of support started arriving at the hospital. Parents who had been through similar situations shared their stories. Grace's students sent drawings and cards to their little warrior sisters. Even Emily showed up one afternoon, carrying 2 small teddy bears. "They're anti-allergenic," she explained, embarrassed. "I researched what was suitable for premature babies." The gesture, though simple, meant a lot. It was the first step towards acceptance. After a month, Rose was strong enough to have her first skin-to-skin contact with Grace. Andrew filmed the moment, silent tears streaming down his face as he watched mother and daughter reconnect. "Your turn, Daddy." The nurse smiled a few days later, helping him to position Lily on his chest. The feeling was indescribable. The little one snuggled against him, her tiny heart beating close to his. At that moment, Andrew fully understood what it meant to be a father. "I spoke to the council today," he told Grace later. "I'm going to take a 6-month leave when the girls are discharged." "Andrew, it's non-negotiable," he smiled. "I've wasted too many moments focusing only on work. I won't make the same mistake with our daughters." The transformation from powerful CEO to devoted father did not go unnoticed by the hospital staff. The nurses smiled as they watched him change tiny diapers, with the same concentration he used in million-dollar negotiations. One evening, while reading another chapter of The Little Prince, Andrew noticed something different. Lily had opened her eyes and was watching him intently. "Grace," he called softly. Look, it was the first real eye contact with the smallest of the twins. Her eyes, a perfect blend of Grace's and his, seemed to contain all the wisdom in the world. "Hi, Princess," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Daddy's here." In response, Lily wrapped her tiny hand around his little finger. The heart monitor registered a perfectly rhythmic beat. "It's official," Grace laughed through her tears. "She's definitely a Pierce, always getting what she wants." Andrew kissed the top of Grace's head, his heart overflowing with love for his family. There, in the quiet of the neonatal ICU, between the beeps of monitors and the soft hum of incubators, he found a fundamental truth. The greatest miracles come in small packages, and the strongest love is born in the toughest battles. After 2 months in hospital, the twins were finally discharged. The day dawned sunny, as if the sky itself was celebrating the occasion. Andrew personally supervised every detail of their departure from the hospital, while Grace dressed the girls in the outfits that their school class had given them. Pink jumpsuits for Rose and lilac ones for Lily. "They look so small in their car seats," Grace commented, adjusting the delicate bow in Rose's curly hair. "But they're the strongest I've ever met," Andrew replied, watching Lily sleep serenely. The journey home was a carefully planned event. Harrison drove with extraordinary caution, as if he were carrying the world's most precious treasure. And, in a way, he was. "Ready?" Andrew asked when they arrived at the new apartment. Grace hesitated. She hadn't yet seen the place he had chosen for them, insisting on keeping it a surprise. When the door opened, she lost her breath. The apartment was a spacious duplex overlooking Central Park. But what thrilled her wasn't the luxury. It was the attention to detail. The walls of the girls' bedroom were decorated with a hand-painted mural depicting the night sky. Tiny stars twinkled softly on the ceiling. "The Little Prince," she whispered, recognizing the inspiration, "so that they always remember that dreams have no limits," Andrew explained, cradling Lily. The room had 2 handmade cribs, each with a different mobile, Rose's for Rose and Lily's for Lily. A breastfeeding armchair was strategically placed near the window overlooking the park, but it was a specific detail that brought tears to Grace's face. On a wall, framed, was Melissa's essay on different types of families. "Andrew, wait," he smiled, handing Lily to her. "There's something else." In the office, an entire wall had been transformed into a library. Grace recognized many of the titles she used to use in her classes. "This is your space," he explained, "for when you go back to teaching, preparing your lessons, or simply reading." "Go back to teaching?" she asked in surprise. "I thought that I'd expect you to stop working," he added softly. "Grace, your work is part of who you are. The girls need to see their mother fulfilling her dreams." At that moment, as if in agreement, both babies began to cry, hungry. The next few days were an adjustment to the new routine. Andrew surprised everyone, especially himself, with his dedication to the most basic care. He changed diapers with surgical precision, prepared bottles in the middle of the night, and had developed his own technique for burping Rose. "You're a natural at it," Grace commented one evening, finding him humming softly to Lily. "I have good teachers," he smiled, watching his daughter fall asleep. The powerful CEO's transformation was the topic of conversation all over New York. Photos of him carrying the twins in the park or pushing the double stroller circulated on social media, generating a surprising wave of public support. One afternoon, while the girls were asleep, Grace found Andrew in his office, concentrating on documents, sir. "What's this?" she asked, noticing his serious expression. "Adoption papers," he replied simply. "If you agree." Grace sat down, moved. "Andrew, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted her gently, "not out of obligation, but because they're already my daughters in every way that matters." Lily, sitting next to Andrew, watched her sister with contemplative eyes, still preferring to crawl with calculated precision rather than risk walking. "Just like Dad," Grace teased, picking Rose up on her lap, "always taking risks." "And Lily is you in miniature," Andrew replied, admiring how his youngest daughter methodically stacked colored blocks, planning every move. The party brought together an eclectic group. Executives from Carter Enterprises mingled with teachers from Grace's school, creating a unique atmosphere of celebration. Grace's students, now in their final year, had prepared a special presentation for the little sisters of the class. Emily, who had initially resisted the idea of an ordinary party, now couldn't get enough of her nieces. "Rose has her mommy's smile," she commented excitedly, watching her niece play. The biggest surprise of the afternoon came when Melissa, the student whose essay had touched their hearts a year earlier, took to the makeshift stage. "A year ago," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I wrote about how love doesn't follow rules. Today, looking at the Carter-Harper family, I see that I was right. Love is choice. It's waking up every day and deciding to love, even when it's hard." Andrew squeezed Grace's hand, remembering the challenging moments of the last year, the sleepless nights, the worries about every little fever, the constant adjustments to their routines. "So," Melissa continued, "I want to announce that I've been accepted to NYU on a full scholarship. I'm going to study education, like Miss Harper, because I've learned that we can change the world, one classroom at a time." The applause was interrupted by the distinctive sound of small, hesitant footsteps. Everyone turned to see Lily, finally determined to take her first steps, striding determinedly towards her sister. "Lee!" Rose shouted enthusiastically, holding out her arms. The twins met in the middle of the hall, collapsing together in contagious laughter. The moment perfectly captured their essence, different in personality, but inseparable in love. Later, after the party, in the quiet of his apartment, Andrew found Grace on the balcony, watching the city. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, hugging her from behind. "How life twists and turns," she replied. "A year ago, I was terrified in hospital, praying that our girls would survive. Today, we're a family," he added. "An unconventional family," she smiled. "The best kind of family," Andrew corrected, turning her to face him. "Grace Harper, marry me." The proposal, although expected, took her by surprise. "Andrew, not because of social convention or expectations," he continued, "but because I want to wake up every day next to you. I want another 100 years of moments like today." "I want," he was interrupted by the twins crying simultaneously. "Their timing is still impeccable," Grace laughed. In the girls' room, they found Rose trying to climb into the crib, while Lily watched her with comic disapproval. "Well," Andrew asked as he helped Grace calm the babies down, "are you going to keep me in suspense?" Grace picked up the small wooden cross she still kept hanging near the cribs, the same one she had given him in the hospital after the accident. "This cross belonged to my grandmother," she explained. "She said it was a symbol that the greatest miracles come disguised as accidents of fate." She placed the cross in his hands. "Yes, Andrew Carter, I will marry you." The twins, as if understanding the importance of the moment, finally calmed down. Rose rested her head on Grace's shoulder while Lily played with her father's tie. Andrew looked at his family, this perfectly imperfect unit that fate had given him. It wasn't the legacy he had imagined for himself, but it was infinitely better than any previous dream. "You know," he said softly, "that accident was the best thing that ever happened to me." Grace smiled, remembering the rainy night that had changed their lives. Sometimes we need to lose ourselves completely to find our true path. Outside, the city continued its frenetic pace, but inside that apartment, time seemed suspended in a perfect moment of happiness. The stars on the ceiling of the girl's bedroom twinkled softly, like silent witnesses that sometimes the most beautiful fairy tales are those that life writes by chance. The end. What is the true meaning of family, the ties we inherit, or the ones we choose to build? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your honest opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time. Are you going to keep me in suspense? Grace picked up the small wooden cross she still kept hanging near the cribs, the same one she had given him in the hospital after the accident. "This cross belonged to my grandmother," she explained. "She said it was a symbol that the greatest miracles come disguised as accidents of fate." She placed the cross in his hands. "Yes, Andrew Carter, I will marry you." The twins, as if understanding the importance of the moment, finally calmed down. Rose rested her head on Grace's shoulder, while Lily played with her father's tie. Andrew looked at his family, this perfectly imperfect unit that fate had given him. It wasn't the legacy he had imagined for himself, but it was infinitely better than any previous dream. "You know," he said softly, "that accident was the best thing that ever happened to me." Grace smiled, remembering the rainy night that had changed their lives. Sometimes, we need to lose ourselves completely to find our true path. Outside, the city continued its frenetic pace, but inside that apartment, time seemed suspended in a perfect moment of happiness. The stars on the ceiling of the girl's bedroom twinkled softly, like silent witnesses that sometimes the most beautiful fairy tales are those that life writes by chance. The end. What is the true meaning of family, the ties we inherit, or the ones we choose to build? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your honest opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.